The moment Gabriella stepped out of the cold mountain water, believing she was completely alone, her world stopped. A single voice from behind her, a voice she knew too well, froze her barefoot on the rocks. She had come to this quiet place to breathe, to escape, to exist without expectations for just 1 hour. But fate had followed her, wearing the shape of a cowboy who was never supposed to see her this way. By sundown, nothing in her life would ever fit the same again. Gabriella Mathias had lived in the valley beneath the Rockies for 3 years. It was 1883, a time when the land was still raw and stubborn, shaped more by storms and hard work than by the people trying to tame it. The settlement was small, uneven buildings scattered across a wide valley, where cattle grazed and dust drifted like restless ghosts. She arrived at 19 with her widowed father, a blacksmith with lungs that tired too quickly. Now 22, she carried more responsibility than most of the men in the valley. She kept ranch ledgers straight, tracked grain prices, and handled contracts with a sharp eye no one expected from a young woman. People respected her because competence was rare, and she had earned every ounce of it. Elliot Brennan, the man who owned most of the cattle and half the decisions in the settlement, had seen that competence before anyone else. He was 41, lean, steady, and quiet enough to make other men nervous. He had built his ranch from nothing, and folks said he never made a choice without thinking 3 times. But when he looked at Gabriella, something in him shifted, quietly, carefully, like a man hiding a fire behind his ribs. They met because of numbers. A supplier had shorted the ranch by hundreds of pounds of feed, and Gabriella had been the only person who noticed. When she laid the ledgers in front of Elliot, his cold creek water eyes softened for the first time. "You've got a good eye," he said. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Call me Elliot." That small exchange became the beginning of everything neither of them dared name. In the months that followed, he called on her often, sometimes for accounting, sometimes for decisions that had nothing to do with numbers at all. He asked her thoughts on grazing land, the new well, the workers, complaints. He stood close when she worked, his presence steady and warm. And though he hardly touched her, the air between them sometimes tightened enough to steal her breath. He held her to higher standards than anyone else, but it wasn't punishment. She came to understand it was respect. Expectation meant trust, and yet he stayed careful, always careful, too careful. Until the morning she left before dawn, riding north alone. The men were working the southern pastures. Her father was asleep. The settlement was still wrapped in quiet, and for once, Gabriella had no responsibilities clawing at her. She followed a faint trail into the hills, searching for something she had only heard the ranch hands whisper about, a hidden waterfall where snowmelt dropped over smooth stone. When she found it, she felt something inside her unclench. Water fell 20 feet into a clear pool. Ferns lined the rocks. Wildflowers clung stubbornly to cracks in the cliff. And for the first time in months, Gabriella felt alone in a way that didn't hurt. She hadn't planned to bathe, but heat, dust, and exhaustion made the choice for her. The settlement was miles away. No one knew where she had gone. She unbuttoned her blouse, peeled off dusty layers, and stepped into the cold water with a gasp that echoed off stone. For 15 minutes she floated on her back, eyes closed, letting the world shrink until it was only sky, water, and the sound of her own breathing. No ledgers, no cattle contracts, no expectations, just Gabriella. Quiet, unguarded, free. When she stepped out of the water, droplets sliding down her skin, she reached for her blouse. And a voice cut the air in half. "Gabriella." Elliot's voice. Low, shaken, raw. She froze, her breath locked. Her hands hung useless at her sides. Heat flooded her face as she pressed her blouse against herself, too stunned to move, too exposed to breathe. She didn't turn. She couldn't. "I didn't know you were here," he said quickly. His words came out uneven, like a man losing a fight with his own control. "I swear I didn't. I'll go. I'm leaving." Boots scraped on stone. He really was going. "Wait," she whispered. Her voice wasn't steady. It wasn't planned. She didn't know why she said it, only that letting him walk away without a word felt worse than the fire burning in her cheeks. He stopped. Neither of them moved. Water dripped from her hair. The waterfall roared like it was trying to fill the silence neither of them knew how to break. "Turn around?" she said, barely audible. "I already did," Elliot answered softly. "I haven't looked since. I wouldn't do that to you." Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. "Turn around," she repeated, gathering the fabric tighter against her. A long pause. Then the faint sound of boots shifting. He turned, and everything, her life, her future, her heart, began to change. Gabriella dressed with shaking hands, her back still turned to him. When she finally gathered enough courage to face him, Elliot stood 20 feet away with his hat in his hands. He looked wrecked, embarrassed, and more honest than she had ever seen him. His eyes held a struggle that had been burning long before today. "I didn't know this place existed," he said quietly. "I came up here to think. I never would have, Gabriella. I would never disrespect you." She clutched the fabric at her throat, still trembling, still trying to breathe. "How long were you standing there?" "Not long," he said. His voice was tight and low. "Long enough to know I should have turned around faster than I did. And I'm sorry." But he wasn't only sorry, she could see it in the way he wouldn't meet her eyes for more than a second. Something else lived beneath the apology, something deeper, something that scared him. "I can't pretend this didn't happen," she said softly. Elliot swallowed hard. "I was going to try, for your sake, but I know we can't." The space between them felt too full, too heavy, too real. "Why were you really up here?" she asked. He hesitated. Then, with a breath that shook just barely, he said, "Because keeping my distance from you stopped working." Quote. Her heart stumbled. He lifted his eyes and finally looked straight at her. "I've been trying to stay away," he said, "and I can't anymore." The words hit her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. All the months of tension. All the looks that lingered a moment too long. The silence that felt like unspoken questions. She felt it all again. Every moment she tried to convince herself she imagined. But hearing it from him, it changed everything. "Yesterday," he continued quietly, "I saw you happy, free, not weighed down by the work or the town or the eyes always watching you. And I realized something I should have said months ago." Her heartbeat slowed, focused, waited. "I care for you more than I should." The world around them seemed to stop. Gabriella took a step toward him. Elliot didn't move, but his breath hitched like her closeness frightened him more than any danger he'd ever faced. "You think I don't know how complicated this is?" she asked. "You think I haven't been fighting the same thing?" He blinked, stunned. "You?" Quote. "Yes, Elliot," she said, her voice finally steady. "I feel the same." The relief on his face looked like something breaking free after being held too tightly for too long, but he shook his head once, slowly, forcing himself back into restraint. "This place, this valley, these people, they'll talk," he said. "They'll say I took advantage of you. They'll say you weren't given a choice." "Then let them talk," Gabriella said. "The choice is mine, not theirs." He looked at her as if she had said something impossible. "You're young," he murmured. "You're not old," she replied. "I'm responsible for half the families in this settlement. And I'm responsible for myself." Another step. Only 10 feet separated them. "Elliot," she said softly, "stop running." He closed his eyes, jaw tight, fighting a losing battle with himself. "Say what you've been trying not to say," she whispered. He opened his eyes. And this time, he didn't hide. "I'm in love with you," he said quietly. "I have been for a long time. And it scares me every day." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, like approaching a wild thing he didn't want to startle. "If we move forward," he said, "it has to be honest, open, no secrets. I won't hide you. I won't let anyone think you're under my authority or control. I'll step back. I'll change whatever I must." Her eyes softened. Her heart finally exhaled. "You don't have to give anything up," Gabriella said. "I don't want you to lose anything because of me." "I'm not losing," he said. "I'm choosing." The last bit of space between them dissolved. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her cheek with a gentleness that made her knees weaken. "I'm going to kiss you," he said softly. "Tell me if I should stop." "You won't need to stop," she whispered. The kiss was careful at first, soft and full of trembling hope. When she leaned into him, his restraint cracked just enough to show the depth he had been holding back for months. He pulled her closer, and she clutched the front of his shirt, feeling something shift inside her. Something certain and steady and terrifying in the best way. They stayed like that until the world around them steadied again. When they finally parted, their foreheads rested together, breaths mingling. "No going back now," he said. "Good," she answered. They walked down the trail separately, but both knew they would never be separate again. The next morning, he asked to speak with her alone, not in the barn, not in the office, somewhere private. What happened next would shake the settlement and set the course for everything that followed. The morning after the waterfall changed everything, Gabriella woke to the careful knocking of a man who had not slept either. Elliot stood on her doorstep with his hat in his hands and worry written across his face. He looked like a man who had rehearsed every word but still wasn't sure how to begin. "Not here," she whispered, glancing toward her father's room. "He's sleeping." He nodded. "There's a supply shed behind the main barn. No one's there this early." It wasn't proper, it wasn't safe, it didn't matter. "Lead the way," she said. They walked through the quiet settlement, the sun barely rising, the world unaware that the ground beneath them had already shifted. Inside the shed, sunlight slipped through the gaps in the boards, painting the room in thin gold stripes. Elliot closed the door behind them and stood awkwardly, as if unsure of his right to occupy the same air as her anymore. "You said you needed to talk," Gabriella said. He looked at her, then looked away, gathering courage like a man reaching into fire. "The beginning," he murmured. "I should start at the beginning." She waited. 2 years ago," he said slowly, "when you corrected that grain order, I realized you were smarter than every man I employed. I thought it was respect. Then I thought it was admiration, but it was never just that." He rubbed the back of his neck, a rare sign of nerves. "I started watching for you," he continued quietly. "Listening for your voice. Adjusting my schedule just so I might walk past you in the office. I kept telling myself it was nothing, but it wasn't nothing." Her breath caught. "I pulled back," he said, "over and over, because I'm older, because people talk, because you deserve a choice, because I didn't want to let my feelings become your burden." Gabriella stepped closer. "You were never a burden," she said. "No," he replied softly. "You were a miracle I didn't know what to do with." The words struck deep, warm and terrifying. He swallowed hard before continuing. "Yesterday, when I saw you, not the way you think," he added quickly, "but the way you were, free, happy, unafraid, I realized something had broken in me. I couldn't keep pretending anymore." "And I don't want you pretending," Gabriella said. "Not now, not ever." His voice dropped. "You feel the same." She nodded. "I have for months." He closed his eyes, relief washing through him like a quiet storm. "But Gabriella," he said, opening them again, "this will change everything. If we choose this, it has to be honest. I won't hide you. I won't let anyone claim you were pressured. I'll step back from authority where needed. I'll change the ranch structure, whatever keeps you respected." Her heart tightened. "You don't have to step back from anything," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I do. Because if we're equals in love, you must be my equal everywhere else too." She didn't look away. "Then we'll be equals." He searched her face, then finally, slowly, took her hand. It was warm, steady, certain. "Gabriella," he whispered, "I love you." She squeezed his hand. "I love you too." There was nothing reckless in the moment they shared after that. No fear, no confusion, no shame, just two people finally allowing themselves to speak what had lived in their hearts for too long. When they left the shed, the sun was fully up, casting long shadows across the ranch yard. For the first time, neither of them walked away pretending they were strangers. Days later, Elliot began reshaping the ranch leadership. He stepped back from certain roles, elevating other ranchers, and publicly naming Gabriella as an independent partner in trade and accounts. Some people muttered, others accepted it without fuss. But Elliot never wavered. 3 weeks later, he stood in the ranch office at dusk, voice quiet but sure. "I want to marry you," he said, not in secret, not ashamed, not hurried, properly. "You don't need to ask twice," Gabriella whispered. They married in late September on a plateau above the valley. The sky was a brilliant blue, the wind gentle, the mountains watching like old silent witnesses. 40 people came, some curious, some supportive, all reshaped by what they were seeing. A strong man and a strong woman standing as equals. Her father cried softly. Morin, the ranch cook, pretended she wasn't crying at all. Elliot kissed Gabriella like a man stunned by his own luck. Life after that wasn't perfect. It wasn't supposed to be. They faced trouble, illness, disputes, and long seasons of hard work. They raised children, Ariana, Flynn, and Emery, each of them stitched into their lives with joy and exhaustion and pride. They grew older together, softer in some ways, harder in others, but always side by side. 30 years later, when their hair had silvered and their hands had grown worn from decades of work, they rode north once more to the waterfall. The place looked unchanged. Clear pool, steady fall, ferns clinging to stone. But they were not the same people who had stood here once, young and trembling and unsure. Gabriella looked at Elliot and smiled. "We weren't meant to stay the same," she said. "No," he replied, taking her hand. "We were meant to last." They sat together on the rocks, fully clothed, deeply at peace. The world around them kept moving. The water kept falling, but they stayed. Steady, patient, certain. The waterfall never remembered what happened that day long ago, but they remembered everything. And they rode home, side by side, the way they always had.